This is Target Score Weekly with Joey Slattery and Taylor Allen. Welcome into another episode of Target Score Weekly, basically our midseason review. I'm Joey Slattery, that's Taylor Allen, and big news though after 11 games in the season. Earlier today, we're recording this on Friday, June 28th. Byron Mullens, the big signing offseason acquisition of the offseason. It was the former NBA first-round pick, former NBA starter. Didn't pan out the way everybody had hoped, and now he has been released. This has been a crazy year, Tay. I mean, you look at it from the way this has started out to the 4-game losing streak and all the drama surrounding it, and you lose Teddy Allen first, and then Byron a few days later, arguably the two top players projected coming into the season. I couldn't have predicted that, but how do you feel about this latest development?
Yeah, this is becoming a new weekly tradition here on Target Score Weekly where we get together and talk about a big name they released. Last week it was Teddy, this week it was Byron, and yeah, like you said, going into the season, I mean, if you pick two guys who'd be kind of the face of this team, the biggest names, most accomplished guys, probably the most important guys heading into this year, it was Teddy and Byron. And here we are just past the midway point, and both these guys are gone, and for very different reasons, of course, but I think we kind of saw the writing on the wall for Byron a little bit in that Saskatchewan game. I know he didn't play last night against Niagara, but that Saskatchewan game, he started the game, played 3 minutes, and then he came back on in the second half and played another 3 minutes, and then that was it. And I realize some teams you kind of match up differently with, and some teams you kind of want to play more small ball in or whatever. But I mean, to see his minutes drop to 6 minutes, it's kind of like, okay, like something might be going on here. And then obviously the last game against Niagara, he doesn't play a single minute. So it's like, okay, something really is going on here. So when the announcement was officially made today on Friday, it wasn't like, oh my goodness, didn't see this coming. It was kind of like, yeah, this isn't exactly a shocker, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who they fill those shoes. They need another big now for sure, but yeah, I mean, this move sadly did not pan out for the Sea Bears. You know, this guy with his NBA experience, we kind of had some big expectations, and yeah, he had some moments, but yeah, he did not live up to the hype. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think it was in the third game of the year, the second home game. I think it was against Ottawa. I think he had the 18 points there. I think he had a double-double, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, you're right. You almost feel bad. So from my understanding, this was mutual. He's pursuing contracts. In the statement, it says in the Asian market. He's played out there before. And it just wasn't panning out. And I don't know if that's a product of how things have changed since maybe even training camp. You have Teddy Allen and everything's focused around him. Then you cut him and you're, really sticking to the system now where things are moving around, and just didn't seem like he can find his fit really. Like it seemed a little bit out of sorts. And yeah, it's a tough one because it's tough to have those expectations that I'm sure he takes with him everywhere he plays, right? I mean, you're a former first round pick, NBA starter. You got to hear about it every time you go somewhere.
And you're 7 feet tall.
And you're 17 feet tall and you can't reinvent yourself, right? And being 7 feet tall, I mean, he was a pretty good 3-point shooter, but everybody hated that he put up threes. But that's kind of the downfall with that. And I think even from the Sea Bears standpoint, they would have liked to have seen him attack the basket. I think that was one of the things that, I noticed watching him play was, he liked to step out more than he liked to step in, but there's a lot of times where, he's not around for rebounds because of it, right? As a 7-footer and the struggles they had rebounding, I'm sure you want your tallest guy, I think he's the tallest guy in the league, under the basket, able to give you a hand there. And, just there were times where I felt like, even with him, with the offense, there might've been some stalls, in terms of on the pick and roll and things like that. It just didn't seem to suit his skill set. And, the Sea Bears had found success bringing in Emmanuel Acott. And the Scotty Lindsay acquisition, he made his debut, a good one yesterday, 10 points in his first game. And I think he's coming off some ailments from his winter season. So, you're starting to put the pieces together for this, I wouldn't say smaller, but more athletic lineup, right? You've got guys that can jump out of the gym, with David Wencat being another one. He had a double-double yesterday, 13 rebounds and 11 points. But Yeah, it's you wish him well. I think the one thing is he did have an impact with the players. We talked to him on Target Score Weekly when he first got here, and he talked about his willingness to coach. He wants to be a coach, but also just guide, like guys that want to get to the NBA, that want to advance their career. And I think there was some, good insight shared there with some of the younger players. But at the end of the day, this is a team that is starting to turn a corner, it feels like. Still has to secure its playoff spot. And before the season started was a championship favorite, at least one of them. So it surprised me to an extent, but not like that the announcement was made. It was more of a surprise that this didn't work out, like a longer term surprise. Like it was a surprise in the making, if that makes sense. I just kind of assumed this was going to work out, and but everything kind of just started falling apart in that Niagara game, the first one in Niagara, that road trip, and then coming home to play Edmonton, and we all know how that played out. But just a wild swings in this season. Since our last episode, I believe the last episode they had lost to Edmonton, they had released Teddy. Well, they've gone on to win 3 games since then. They've improved their record to 6-5. They're
Well,
now
hold on.
third in the West.
One more thing on Byron. I just wanted to add. So
Sure.
when Teddy first got released, he was going on Instagram Live and whatnot. And one of his first Instagram Lives after he got released, lots of people are commenting and saying not exactly nice things about Byron, because there's people on Byron's side, people on Teddy's side, because it's obvious that there was a rift between those two, and that was kind of one of the reasons why Teddy was let go. So, anyways, people are saying these comments about Byron and whatever. And Teddy said, honestly, Byron is the most talented player that I've ever played with in my career, which I was not expecting Teddy to say, because, again, him and Byron probably aren't going to be sending each other Christmas cards this
Do
December.
you sense sarcasm in that, though?
You know what? I didn't.
No.
He said, the way he said it, I did not sense sarcasm, but who knows? Maybe he's got a different style of sarcasm. I don't know. But yeah, like he kind of said, like, yeah, he's the most talented guy that I've played with. So, but like you said, just for whatever reason, basically since game one, it just did not seem like a good fit, or they just didn't know how to use him, or I don't know what it was, but just like every game with him, maybe minus the one against Ottawa, it just didn't seem like a good fit. So yeah,
No,
it's
I think earlier on it felt like a better fit when things were clicking, but as things started falling off the rails and changes were made, I don't know how much of that was due to the new roster makeup, and then having to adjust everything for the players coming in, getting players in. There he seemed to be spending, like, splitting a lot of time too before the games where he had barely any minutes. With Chad and Shane, there are a couple times where you'd see him kind of subbing himself off for Chad. But no, it's like he's obviously a good basketball player. It just, there's not always a good fit in every team, right? Like, talking to Victor Razzo, who's the head coach of Niagara, there's a team that, since they've been here, like they're a team that have been around since the CBL's inception 6 years ago, and they've always been good. They haven't won a championship, but last year they lose in the semifinals. I think they've even had a finals appearance. But this is a team that year over year is pretty good. But you also see a lot of guys coming back, and you look at the acquisitions those guys made, they seem very tactical, like they fill a role, and there's a lot of staying power there, right? And it's because they have the ingredients that work. And I think right now with the Sea Bears, uh, it's finding out what the post Teddy Allen game looks like, right? I think for last year it worked really well with Teddy. This year it started off well, and then it went completely off the rails. And now you got to figure out your identity after basically building it around Teddy for a while, right? So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But it kind of goes to show too that just because it's a big name player, a super talented player, doesn't mean it's just automatically going to work out. I mean, I know we've seen it in the pros time and again, like in terms of like the NBA and NHL, but like even at this level, right? It's the same deal. Just because they're all, all stars, doesn't
don't
mean
fall in
they're
love with
going to
the
beat
NBA
everybody.
resume. Like,
Well,
it's
exactly,
so
right.
easy
It
to
does
do
come
that,
down to fit.
but
Yeah, it does come down to fit. So so this is a new big chapter. So since then, like I said, they're 6-5. They went from the bottom of the league, or second last. I don't know if they ever went underneath Ottawa, but from second last in the league to now, top 5 in the league. They're third in the West, which is a really strong conference. They're starting to make ground. They've even the playing field now with Saskatchewan and Vancouver. They're 1-1 in those season series. They have Edmonton coming back on Wednesday, July 3rd. That's another huge game, and I'm interested to see that game too because I don't think the game that we saw them play Edmonton, I don't think had much to do with what was happening on the court as much as what was happening on the bench for everybody to see and the drama that came out. I think that was less about game planning and more about, I don't know if it's ego management or whatever, but that's the game where I think everything boiled over and led to Teddy's dismissal. And then, a few days later, a week later, Byron gets dismissed, not for the same reasons. It doesn't sound like, but either way, you lose your two top players, but they're in good shape. I mean, you look at where they are right now. I had said last episode, 4-game losing streak is almost a death wish in this league with 20 games, right? There's a sense of urgency. They haven't been pretty for the most part. They've definitely been dramatic, and they most definitely have been entertaining. And I'm referring mostly to the Vancouver and Saskatchewan games. The Niagara game, to me, the one at home that they just won, their 6th win of the year, that one felt more complete. Like, we were seeing them play the brand of basketball that head coach Mike Taylor has been wanting them to play for a longer sequence. There weren't many lulls in the game where, they allowed Niagara to come back. I don't think Niagara played their best, but I think part of that is because of the pressure that Winnipeg put on them. And the fact that even from 3 weeks ago, it's a totally different team that they were playing. So whatever you figured out about Winnipeg in the first game is now gone to the wayside with the team that's assembled now. But I was very impressed with how they played yesterday. I mean, the ball was moving. There's really been an emphasis on ball movement. You can tell, like, there's more guys getting touches. They're finding more open shots. They're not forcing up as many shots. And there seems to be a little bit of cohesiveness there, even defensively. Defensively, they seem more on the same page. There's less holes. You're seeing the help side defense coming in a timely fashion and contesting shots properly. Even fouls. I think they had like 4 fouls in the first half yesterday. Like, that's crazy. Like, for a league that does call a lot of fouls, Winnipeg played really clean yesterday against Niagara. So I do feel like they've turned a corner. There's still a long way to go. I'm not sitting here saying
Well,
that
with
now
that said,
everything's going to
though,
be gravy.
yeah, but I mean, think about it this way. I mean, this first half has totally gone off the tracks, right? Like, there's so
Mm-hmm.
many things, so many unexpected things happened. And the fact that they could be sitting here today at 6-5 is a huge victory, right? No one saw Teddy getting released. No one saw Byron getting released. And you compared to last year, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think they had any signings after the first game last year, right? Like, the guys that they had in training camp and they started game one with, that's who they basically finished the year with, other than EJ Anasike, who went to play for the Nigerian national team. Where
That, and
this
I
year,
think was Jelani here the whole year? I think he might have missed a game or two, but like, he was
he
signed. He
missed
just
training
didn't
camp, but he
report.
was
That's
there
what it
game
was.
one. He was their best player in game one. He actually won them that game. But you look at
You're
this
right.
year, right? They signed Emmanuel Acott after the season started. They signed Justin Wright-Foreman after the season started. Scotty Lindsay just signed him last week. David Wencat, he joined late because his season overseas went a little late. And then they're going to be signing, I would assume, a replacement for Byron. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players who have joined, who missed training camp, who joined this team at least a week, if not weeks, into the season. And they're sitting here at 6-5. They don't even know each other's names yet. Never mind how to play together yet, right? So to be in 6-5, above 500, currently in a playoff spot, they should be thrilled. So as long as they, can figure it out towards the end of the year, they're going to be in really good shape. So because this easily
Yeah.
could have gone, like, it went off the tracks, but they easily could have, been a huge disaster. And like I kind of said last week, like, that the team looked broken in that last game with Teddy. I did not foresee them, turning off or churning out a 3-game win streak like they just have, but they look like a completely different team this past week. Justin Wright-Foreman, it's making me eat my words because I really liked his game
Did
these
you
past
draft
couple
that
games.
apology letter to Justin Wright
I'm
Foreman?
working on it. Yeah, I'm working on it. Yeah, yeah. I'll deliver to him in
That's
person next
that's
time
an
I see him.
athlete that made you eat your words. That yep, you were
He
you were
did,
you
but
were
I
no
mean,
holds barred on that one. And what talk about a response? I mean, maybe you can just flat out take credit for the turnaround. I think you lit a fire under him, and he proceeded not only to go off, but also set records. So you could,
assist
I guess,
records. I
take a
don't care
bow
about the
for that.
points, man. The fact that he set the assist record, 15 assists, or was it 16 assists?
It's
Uh,
16. So well, that's the thing. So yesterday, we start thinking, okay, he's flirting with it. He's got 12, 13 assists. And then he hits 14. And then there was on the website, because like while I'm doing the sideline reporting, the like we're just following the box score, like the live box score that everybody sees, and it didn't update. So I'm like, okay, like he set the record, like in terms of tied it. And by the time I get out there for the interview, I'm like, yeah, he tied the record. Thankfully, we have a great producer in my ear, Candace, who's like, it's actually 16. And I'm like, great. In the middle of the interview, I'm like, I'm happy that we're here to say that you set the record, because I've had that happen to me before with Teddy last year. I can't remember which record. Don't know if it was single game or what, but he had
I
some
think it
sort of
was a
record that he set.
3-point record, I think it was.
That's what it was. Yeah. And the initial stat didn't have the
I missed one.
proper
Yeah.
reflection. Yeah. And then it was added later. So I always felt bad because you feel like you're taken away from the moment. But this one, it was corrected and he had his moment. And the one thing that like him and I talked about when he first came in and we were doing the introductory interview, is he said he's excited to play point guard again, like to be a true point guard. And you and I talked about that because you already had Jared Ogungbemi Jackson, who was playing really well up until that point. But he was saying, like, I think people are going to be surprised with my playmaking ability. We talk about my scoring all the time. And yes, I was a leading scorer last year, but to see that guy, and I think that's always what the hope was for Teddy, right? To figure that out, where there's nights where you're going to get double teamed, triple teamed, and it's a matter of effectively finding your teammates in positions that they can score, like leveraging that in a way that you're getting other guys open, and how to attack those. And Teddy had some great individual games where he overcame that himself. But I think what you're seeing with Justin is a guy who can definitely score and can, and there's a point in the Vancouver game. Vancouver's the one he hit the game winner. And there were a couple times where you can tell where like the shot clock's winding down. He's like, no, give me the ball. Like I'm the go-to guy. Like there's no there's no discussion, there's no second thought. It's just like that's the guy whose hands the ball needs to be in when we need to get a shot up immediately. But he doesn't rush it. And they find all the other options first. And on a night like yesterday, he still had 22 points. That's insane. But the 16 assists is what impressed me, because every player on that team last night that played. So the only players dressed that didn't play were Sean Moranin and Byron Mullens. Everybody had at least a few points. Everybody. And he assisted on 16 of those. So the offense was really going through Justin yesterday, and I think he did a tremendous job. And it was really nice to see, your leading scorer understanding that tonight's not the night that I'm going to be, putting up 30 to 40 points. Like tonight's the night that I'm going to need my teammates to step up, and to everybody's credit, they did. And, that's one thing he said, though. He said, I'm a basketball junkie in the post-game show yesterday. And he said that he watched last year's games against Niagara when he was playing with Saskatchewan to see how they guarded him. A lot of the same guys are there. And he said he knew exactly what was coming for him. So he gave credit to Sean Moranin, and Darren Bombing had to step in for the co-hosting because Emily Potter's out with the national team. And he actually gave his Unsung Hero Award to Sean Moranin, because I think that's the epitome of unsung, a guy who didn't see any court time, but got direct credit for the win because of how he helped prepare the best player, which is a huge learning experience for a guy who's a young point guard who was trying to make a career himself. But I was really impressed yesterday with how everything came together, with how he played that game, particularly how he was manning the offense, and just to see the kind of shots they were getting, like even the ones they missed were open looks. I didn't feel like much was forced yesterday. And I think that's the kind of basketball Mike Taylor wants to see from here on in.
Yeah, I think all the numbers are good and stuff, especially the assists. You love to see that. But I think what we've seen this past week, these past 3 games, is that he's really kind of embraced the role of being a leader, right? Like
Yeah.
that right there. That's a perfect example. Like you just set the assist record. You can easily, pat yourself on the back and talk about how great of a game you played and whatever. But he's talking about literally one of the 2 guys who did not even see the floor, and he's giving him credit.
Yeah.
That's the type of guy that you will run through a wall to play for, right? So
Totally.
that's a
And
great sign, because what I saw in the game, the last game with Teddy, 3 games ago with Justin, I didn't see leadership tendencies there, but since then he's kind of looked like a completely different player, leadership wise and on the court too, obviously. So yeah, he's been huge.
So from what I'm hearing is, like there's no shortage of leaders on this team. You've got guys like Alex Campbell, Chad Posthumous, Jared Ogambemi Jackson, but it does sound like he's come in here and really set the tone in the locker room. A voice guys are going to listen to, a voice of reason, a passionate guy. You see him on the bench. He does get fired up with guys, but it seems constructive, not destructive. Even yesterday, he got a technical foul on Khalil Ahmad's. It ended up being a flopping, like a flopping foul, but at the time he thought the foul was going to Winnipeg, I guess. And he freaks out and he gets a technical, right? Like the ref tees him up right away. And immediately he just turns around, doesn't get engaged. I guess I didn't hear exactly, but it looks like he went to Mike, like, yeah, my bad, Mike Taylor, and not understanding the foul, but not letting it go past that. It was bad enough, but immediately in the moment, didn't even put himself in a position to come close to getting a second one, just immediately ate it and moved on and had a spectacular game. Now, I don't want to be the guy to dampen everything, but you talked about how lucky they are,
That's usually
and
me.
where
That's usually my job
I
on this
know, I
show.
know, I know. The one thing I'll say though is that home stretch came at the perfect time
It did.
because as
Yeah.
much as they had that 3-game win streak, they were down 12 points going into target time against Vancouver, and they were down 10 points against Saskatchewan. Most teams don't have a comeback like that in a season.
They were down
They had that.
27 at one point
They
to
were down
Saskatchewan.
27. Yeah, 27. I think 25 at the half to Saskatchewan. To that effect, sure. Even the 25, you break that down. That's one thing. But being down double digits or more going into target time and then coming back, erasing that deficit, and then scoring the next 9 points to the target score before the other team does is spectacular. I commend them for it for sure. But I don't know if that happens in Vancouver. I don't know if that happens in Saskatchewan, right? So I do think while they are happy with where they are, they've come a long way. I do think there is a sense, not luck in terms of like lucky bounces, just luck with the schedule in this case, that they were back home for the amount of time that they have been to rebound in this because there is a chance that they're 6-5 now. So they could have been three, yeah, 3-5 going into the Niagara game. Like, that could have gone the other way. So it's, or whatever. No, that would have been 3-7. Sorry. And math sucks for me. I'm not a great mathematician,
Well, if
but
you
they
wanna
could have
play
had
that
two.
game, though, they should have lost the second game of the year, their home opener against Scarborough.
Well, so that actually adds to my point. Exactly. Right. So there's been a number of games that have been close where they did come out on top. That game, the Scarborough game, is a lucky bounce because two foul shots were missed to win the game. So that one actually is luck on the court. This one, I don't believe it was luck on the court. I think they did play hard, but that doesn't happen very often in this league. To do it, especially do it back to back games. But it seems like they're on the right pace. But I don't want to be overconfident right now because I still think there's a lot they have to figure out. I think yesterday was a good one, but I don't think one game cancels all the issues they were having. Like, is it an anomaly? They just had the one good game where things were clicking. Edmonton's going to be a good test. Edmonton is a really good team. And Edmonton is fast, they're strong, and they play inside. And that's been a hard issue for the Sea Bears. They've made some additions that I think are going to help with that. But it's going to be tested on Wednesday on the game on July 3rd against Edmonton because I think that is a team that is really well built. You talk about a team, maybe not all the stars in the world, but it's built in a way that they're very cohesive. They all have their roles and they all play it really, really well. And they get very balanced scoring. So it's not like you can just, jump on Brody Clark or whatever and, hope for the best with everybody else. Like that, their offense moves very nicely. Well, that's the one thing I notice, especially when you're watching them live, like when they're playing Winnipeg, like just how quickly they move the ball around the perimeter, how they get open for passes. It's a lot to watch. So this will be a good test for Winnipeg. It's another must win. Like, it kind of feels like they're all like, a level of must win until they give themselves a little bit of padding, but especially against those Western teams, you need to even up that series with Edmonton because you have one more game against them. And, I look at Edmonton and Saskatchewan and Calgary, like those. I feel like Vancouver is probably going to end up on top just because of the start they had. But I feel like in that middle bunch, you really have to get ahead of those guys in case we get into a tiebreaker situation going into playoffs.
I'm not a fan of the whole must-win thing in sports. To me, a
I know
must-win
you're not.
game is if you lose, your season's over, or if you lose, you're gonna miss the playoffs for sure. So yes, if they win, it'll make their season easier. But if they lose to Edmonton, they will survive. But I don't think it's fair for them to get knocked. I'll be the positive guy for a change. I'll try this out. I don't think it's fair
I'll
to
try
knock
this
them.
out.
I'll try out this gimmick. I don't think it's fair to knock them for these past 3 games and say, well, they're at home and they can't get away with that stuff if they were on the road and whatever. Because again, this team is trying to figure it out. They're learning on the fly how to play together. They really did not have a training camp because they've had so many important guys now jump in late and whatever. It is so hard to do that at this level.
Yeah.
So hard. Especially now when you look at Justin Wright-Foreman. Okay, he's going to be like, he's the best player on the team. He's the face of the team. He's going to be one of their biggest leaders. He joined late, right? Like that's not an easy situation to be dropped into. So I don't think we should knock them for, yeah, they were playing with fire a little bit in some of those games, but I think also too, like that's kind of a sign of a championship team is that you can, rally late and you can play clutch basketball when you really have to. And, lots of teams, lots of good teams, they can't do that. So they easily could have thrown in the towel when they were down 27 against Saskatchewan. Like
No
if
question.
people left that game at halftime, I would not have blamed anyone because that first half was brutal. And then the second half, even third quarter started out a little slow. And then the fourth quarter, they totally figured it out defensively, offensively. Emmanuel Acott, oh man, we could have spent 30 minutes just talking about this guy's last 2 weeks,
Yeah.
how huge he's been for this team. But like this team is turning the corner here, and I think there's a lot of positive things going on with these guys. And again, once they're even more comfortable with each other, big things can happen. Even though this first half has been a total gong show, so it's gonna be interesting to see.
I'll agree with you on that. I agree with you in the sense that those games are very constructive. The fact that they did come back, and to be fair, like they came back against Vancouver, the best team in the league, right? And there was a sense of desperation. I think the big part for me there was the desperation being answered because Vancouver doesn't have that, right? And I think that also was a part of it. A 12-point lead that they give up going into target time, and what's their second loss of the year. So those guys aren't crying on the way to the locker room. They're probably little disappointed that they allowed a comeback, but you can't win all the games. Yeah, but credit to Winnipeg. They came back. Same with Saskatchewan, right? Saskatchewan, I feel, is kind of the surprise team so far this year for me. Like they're really good. I knew Jalen Harris was a huge addition, but I think they're a pretty complete team. And I was wondering how they were going to respond once they lost Balsillie, but they they're doing great, right? They added there's a Bryce Williams, and so they're in good shape. And I think that to me was one because that's a team that understands that they need every win. Like they're not as good as they are. I don't think they're sitting there thinking we're the best team in the West. We really have to earn every win. And I think that loss for Saskatchewan probably hit a lot harder than it did for Vancouver, if that makes sense. But I'm going to give Winnipeg credit. The one thing is they did dig deep, they did win, and I've said that. At the end of the day, a win is a win. Like it doesn't matter how, it's how many, and that truly is the case because now they need to win a bunch. But it's still, I'm looking at it. There were parts of those games that it didn't have to get there. It's great that they fixed it, but we've seen in the past that they weren't able to fix it and they lost those games, and they lost those 4 in a row, particularly. So here you are now. You've got 3 games. You've built on those 2 dramatic wins, and then you have a pretty, you know, uh, what I say, like a steady game with Niagara, a good game where you're really implementing what you've been wanting to implement and things that Mike Taylor talks about. But now you've got to make it a habit. And that was one thing Mason Boursier said when they won the first game. He's like, it's great to do one, right? But he's like, the great teams do it again and again and again. And he's like, that's where I'm interested to see our response. And it was an interesting way to put it because even the players are like, yeah, we won one and that's great. It's a huge win. But your season isn't defined on one win. The great teams, have to do it again and again. And this team, particularly, if they want to not only get into the playoffs, but you want to host a game in the playoffs too, right? That's the other thing. So it's like one thing to get in that 4th spot and, creep in and, not play a single postseason game at Canada Life Center. It's another thing if you can get that, the quarterfinal game or, the play-in game, whatever, as the home team where you get that fan, you get to play in front of your fans, which obviously in Winnipeg is a huge deal compared to other places. So it's huge. They're in third right now, but like that really doesn't mean anything because they're 6-5 and the other two teams are 5-5. So, if either one of those teams win, then, Winnipeg goes back just because of the wins losses with Calgary and then the scores with Saskatchewan. So it's definitely not in the bag. There's still, it's a very finicky Western Conference. A lot can change. As this league is. It's just, a crazy league in that sense, but it's a step in the good direction. I like what I saw against Niagara and those come from behind wins the first two times. At the end of the day, you strung 3 by any means necessary. Now you have one more game here and then you're on the road again. So we'll see how they respond here. But if they can get that win and go on the road with a 7-5 record, I think that is a lot better than going 6-6. Where I know you hate the term, but
Hot
then they
take.
do
7-5
become
is better than 6-6. Holy smokes!
right. Yeah,
Stop the
hey,
presses.
stop the press. Right. I know. But when you get to 6-6, that's where literally because what last year they had 8 losses, I think, right? For to get in the playoffs, where the spot that they were in, which was second place, which I don't think is going to happen this year. I think there's a lot more losses that are going to be piled up with those teams. So 8 losses. I don't want to test that too early. I'd rather get in the playoffs and then get those 8 losses, knowing that I'm in.
Honestly, I don't think they should really care what their record is. I mean, hosting a home playoff game would be great, but for them, just start playing your best basketball in those last kind of 2 or 3 regular season games, and then show up in the playoffs playing your best ball. Everyone's finally comfortable with each other. You know how to play with each other. And I think if they have to, play their first game on the road or whatever it may be, that they can survive that. They have the talent for that. So these next couple of the games, yeah, it's hard not to worry about the standings and whatever, but I don't think that's that important for them right now. Just make it to the
To be
just make it
fair,
to the big
I don't
dance.
think. Yeah, I don't think they are. I don't think this team is sitting there staring at the
No, I
standings
know they're
and
not.
playing
I'm
out the
just saying for
scenarios.
anyone,
This is
just
me. Like this is how
yeah.
I'm looking at the season. As we're supposed to put on, our glasses of looking at the future and how things are shaping up. I honestly think those guys are just like you say, trying to get the cohesiveness. I think it's just showing up to practice, making sure the new guys are up to date. I don't know if I said this, but with the Byron news, I should have said this much earlier in the podcast. But with the Byron news, I am told that another player will be coming in. Sounds like it's going to be a legitimate post player that is going to be a big guy with G League experience. Name hasn't been released yet. I know they can't technically sign anybody until Byron's been released, which is official on Friday. Therefore, I expect an announcement coming in probably in the next few days because I think the idea is to have this player in by Wednesday with Edmonton, which again, it's Friday already. We're going into a long weekend. So this player shows up, has a few days to get, acclimated with the players, the systems, all that stuff, and then go in against a really hard Edmonton team. And you only have 9 games left. So there's not like you have a lot of time to sit players and, handhold them into their first game or whatever. So whoever's coming in, kind of like we saw with Scotty Lindsay, like he had almost 20 minutes of playing time. You're thrown in the fire, right? It's just you got to figure it out. That's the only way you're going to learn,
That's been the
and we don't have
season with
time to wait around
that's been the
with
season with
everybody.
4 or 5
Emmanuel,
guys thrown into the fire.
and
So
to the credit of the team and Mike Taylor, all of those players came in and were immediate impacts. Right, David Wencat came in and was hot off the start, and he was coming back from Germany after a ride all the way to the finals. And then you've got Acott coming in, same deal. I mean, he's already hit. You think he was in the games he's played? He's like averaging the second most amount of points after Justin Wright-Foreman. He hit the big game winner on the rebound. So these are guys that are having impacts and playing key minutes, and they've been doing really well. So I don't know if that's a preparation thing or adrenaline thing. Whatever it is, it's working, and so I'm pretty confident this new guy coming in will be good. But it's tough when you lose your marquee player, right? Like Mullens being the marquee signing of Winnipeg, that's a big player to lose. So
I
now
don't
you've
think it
got
is
the
that
room.
tough. I don't because he had really nothing to do with this 3-game
No,
winning streak. So bring in
but that's
someone
what
to make an
I mean.
impact.
Like in terms of you, like when you sign a marquee player, with the marquee tag, that's supposed to be your big player. Like it's tough when you have to let that guy go. So now
Yeah,
but on the
this
plus
city
side,
doesn't
you've
care
now
about that.
got this opening that gives you the American opening and the cap space to sign a really good player that can have an impact right away, but it has to be the right fit. It can't be he's got a great resume or he's played in the NBA. It's how does his style of play going to complement and be effective in our system? That is what's going to be key.
Yeah, I mean, this city does like sure everyone likes a marquee name and whatever, but this city, like this is a smart basketball crowd in Winnipeg. They just want to see a good team, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, Byron, him getting cut, not working out, that sucks, but whatever. The city, they're over it. They'll be okay. But does I think we should summarize the first half though before we end the show with the very prestigious Target Score Weekly mid-season awards. So for you, Joey Slattery, this is a hard one, right? Last year this would have been very easy, but for you, who is the first half MVP for these Sea Bears?
First half MVP
That's a hard one.
is, yeah, but it's Justin Wright-Foreman. I mean, I know he wasn't there the whole part of the season, but he came in under totally different circumstances than what he's in right now, right? He came in with how do we make Justin and Teddy work, and they're all going to get their looks, and everything's kind of designed around that. Then you lose Teddy, and he's back to that role that he's used to as leading scorer, but also his ability to facilitate, his ability to lead. I do think this is a guy you said, seems like a guy people would run through a wall for. And I think you're right. So I think the MVP is, I don't think I overthink this one. A lot of guys have contributed, but I think the MVP and needs to continue playing this way, I think, for Seabear's success is definitely Justin Wright-Foreman. Who's yours?
I don't like that pick. Got to be honest with you. He's only played 5 or 6 games, whatever it's been. I think it's got to be a guy who's been here since day one. And I think it would have been Jared, but he missed some time with his back and whatever. So a guy who they've been able to count on every single game. He's had different roles quite often this season, and he's embraced them. Hasn't complained. Plays awesome defense. He's starting to hit some more shots as well. I think it goes to Mason Bercier
I
for
knew
me
you were going to say
personally.
that. So yeah, so I agree with you. And Mason, here's my title for Mason. He's not the MVP. He's the MIP. He is the most important player on this team. I think even when they weren't playing well and everything was hitting the fan, he was still one of the guys that was making things happen positively. And it's not things that pop up on the score sheet. There's one play particularly where against Vancouver in target time, Tajay Moore, who, NBA caliber player, probably the front runner for MVP in the CEBL this year, he's guarding him, sees that moment where he has an ability to knock the ball out. He's going for the steal. He knocks the ball out of bounds. Not a turnover, but he disrupts the offense and shaves a lot of seconds off the clock. Vancouver comes back, has to force up a shot. The immediate play after, he goes up in transition and then hits a transition three. I think it was his only 3-pointer of the game. And they go on to win that game. So I agree with you. I wouldn't call him the MVP, but I do see where you're coming from. I could get on board with that. But I think the most valuable player, just because of the tangible points and stats he's putting up, is Justin Wright-Foreman. But I agree with, I don't agree. No, how do I put this? I agree with you in theory.
I'll take it.
I
That's
like
more
I
than
like the
that's more
pick.
than usual. Yeah, that's more
Yeah,
than
I
usual.
like the pick. It's not mine, and you don't have to like mine, but I actually do like your pick. I think Mason definitely is deserving of the props that he's getting.
Well, this is the award that no one wants to take home, Joey. This is the first half biggest disappointment award.
Mhm.
Who do you got?
Taylor Allen for pooping on Justin Wright-Foreman, and then Justin Wright-Foreman coming back and proving him wrong. No, I'm just kidding. The
That's
biggest
I
disappointment.
actually respect that pick. I respect that more than your Justin Wright-Foreman MVP pick, actually.
No, my most disappointing is definitely, I don't know if it's the player, but it's you can say Byron. For me, it's Teddy Allen. And it's just because that it didn't work out. Statistically, it looked all good, but I think the biggest disappointment was everything that transpired and the fact that he had to get let go and they couldn't make it work with him. To me, there was so much promise around that. You can kind of co-award it if you want between him and Byron. But I think it was like that was the first domino to fall when everything went down, and it was the first domino taken away to get everything back on track. And the city loved Teddy, right? I loved watching Teddy play. He's an entertaining basketball player to watch. Good guy. You're rooting for him. I think everybody in Winnipeg, despite the leave, is rooting for him to do well. And to me, that would be my biggest disappointment, was just with all the hype built around and all of the, yeah, like the helter skelter that's come because of him leaving, right? Or even when he was playing, it was just nothing I was expecting. So I would say that was probably the disappointment of the half season. You?
Yeah, I think I'll give the AJ Hess award. Oh, sorry. I mean the midseason biggest disappointment award to. I mean Teddy's an obvious one. Um, but I'll be different. I'll go with Byron, right? I mean, Teddy, that's a complicated one, but
Mhm.
Byron, I mean, he was here, whatever, and he just it was flat, man. I mean, we already spoke about it. It was just flat. Just didn't deliver for whatever reason, and yeah, he brought some value in some ways as a veteran and whatever, and it was cool seeing this NBA guy here and whatever, but it just didn't work out. It was flat. I don't know if it's his fault, the team's fault, or whose fault it is, but doesn't
But
matter.
it's a disappointment at the end.
He
Yeah.
was probably the biggest disappointment.
I think on court disappointment, in terms of expectation, is definitely Byron. But like just situationally, I guess, or organizationally, like the big disappointment I think was losing Teddy. He's, being so valuable last year.
But it's benefited them.
Um,
So I guess it like
it
that makes it
100%
not a
has. That's
disappointment,
why
I guess. So I don't know.
I think
But
that's why
I get what you're
it's
saying.
the disappointment, right? Is it also could have sewered their whole season.
Yeah.
So credit to the Sea Bears for not letting it do that. But I think that was the biggest disappointment for me, was that 4-game losing streak and just seeing everything fall apart. The fighting on the bench and whatever else happened. It's that to me is the disappointing part of the season. But if I'm talking about, yeah, guy that I expected more statistically from, definitely Byron for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think another award was going to be what's the biggest headline of the first half. But I think we can both agree. We can agree on this one that
Okay,
it was
let's do
Teddy.
that then. Okay, I'm going to switch it. I'm going to say Byron for the disappointment, and then I'll use the Teddy for the headline. That actually makes way more sense. I forgot about the headline one, so that's I'm swapping those.
Yep.
Definitely, that is the headline. I mean, it rattled the league, right? And the crazy thing is, Taylor, the crazy thing is, what the headline was a week prior to that. If we did this show a week prior to that road trip, it would have been that the Sea Bears got Justin Wright-Foreman. That would have been the
Yeah.
biggest headline, because you lose Darius Days. Like, we don't forget, we lost Darius Days too, right? When I say we, Winnipeg lost Darius Days. They lost Darius Days, who was averaging 15 points, 10 rebounds a game through 3 games. And as soon as he left, it was felt immediately. The rebounding just went nowhere, and they lost that physical presence that they had, and that spark plug. And then you get Justin Wright-Foreman. Well, what a rebound! And that would have, like, CEBL Weekly, the weekly show that the league does with DNS, in their show, they get the note that Justin Wright-Foreman just signed, and was signed by Winnipeg, and they stopped the show. They left the cameras rolling, but they stopped the show, and they needed a second to like gather themselves and readjust their power rankings and all this stuff. Like, this was not just in Winnipeg. That Teddy Al or that Justin Wright-Foreman news shook the league, and then further shaking the league is the Teddy Allen dismissal after everything that happened. So it's crazy that how many headlines this team has produced through 10, well, now 11 games, but we'll take away like in the first half of the season, the first 10 games, they had legitimate headlines that I think trumped any headline last year,
Yeah. I'd agree with that 100%. It's
other than like the
been
fans coming out for Winnipeg and how surprising that was
yeah.
last year. But that's happening this year again, so it's not a surprise.
It's been a wild, unpredictable season, that's for sure. Which has made it kind of fun because it's like every week there's been something else to talk about. It's made this podcast quite easy actually. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's been wild, and I'm sure they're really hoping that the second half is a lot quieter, preferably even boring. But for them, not for us. But moving on, next award. Who is the surprise player of the first half? We already talked about, kind of disappointment and Byron and whatever. So surprise in a good way. Who is the surprise kind of breakout player of this first half that maybe you didn't quite see coming?
I think the breakout, like if we talk about surprise, I can go two ways with this. Part of me wants to say Mason, just seeing how, he's played a leadership role, but we kind of expected that even when we had the initial interview when he got signed, when he was in, Manchester. You kind of got a sense for that, passion for the game, that wisdom beyond his years, all that stuff. But another one for me is Simon. And I know that sounds weird, but when this season started, Simon's the big question was his how is he going to play? Are his minutes going to be limited? And they were at first. And now he's back into a starting role as a youth sports player. So I don't know if it's like a surprise is the right word, but it's just the development since the start of the year and some of the players that have stepped up in a positive manner. Because I mean, a lot of negative things have happened. I would definitely have to put it. I think I'd give it to Mason though, just because I always felt like he was always the unsung hero. Like timely charges, timely steals, timely defensive stops. He's so sound defensively as well. And then the other one I can do is maybe just Emmanuel Acott, only because here's a guy that was from Winnipeg that didn't really have, let's say he didn't have as much fanfare around, like, say, Jared Ogunbemi Jackson. Like, I think there's a lot of people, myself included, was like, why? What's like, I don't understand the reasoning behind this signing. Then we find out Darius Days is gone, but then he steps up and becomes like a secondary scorer. So if I'm going to tier it, it would go Simon as 3, Mason as 2, and I'll go Emmanuel Acott as 1, just because I knew he'd be an impact player. I had a feeling, especially after Darius left, but I don't think I fully understood the impact he would have. David Mwenkat, this is exactly what I expected, right? When you look at how he played with Scarborough, going to get you 8 to 12 points a game, but he's going to get those big rebounds and he's going to be athletic. He's going to be intense. And we got all that stuff. With Emmanuel Acott, I didn't really know what to expect. And I'm very pleased with what I'm seeing.
Yeah, for me, it's Emmanuel Acott, 1000%. I mean, he played in this league last summer with Ottawa. Only didn't play a full season, and he didn't really jump off the page and whatever, right? But you could argue that he was really kind of like their MVP of this past week, right? Like some of the, I know he's scoring the target score basket at the end, and everyone gets caught up in that and excited, and that's an easy social media clip and whatever. But the defense, especially in that Saskatchewan game, the defense that he was playing in target time when they could not afford for Saskatchewan to really score at all was super clutch. And you look at this kid, what is he? He's 6'8", super lengthy. He's fast. He can jump through the roof. Like he is built like an NBA player. Just his offensive game isn't at that level, obviously, right? But like I think his stock is going way up after the summer because
I think so.
like we said, like when he first got signed, we're both kind of like, well, like this is cool, another Winnipeg guy, and he's just brings some size and defense and whatever. But like, where does he really fit in? But heading into the back half of the year, like Emmanuel is going to be one of their most important players for sure, and he's still a super young player. Like he was only in school 2 years ago, right? Like he's still figuring out like how to be a professional and whatever. And we're really seeing a huge second year leap from him, which has been pretty cool to see.
And another thing for him, he's also playing 2 roles that are not similar. Like he's filling in at the 5 right now, but he's also been playing the 3 at times. Like, so you look at it, like he's got guard skills. Like, he's a big guard, but a small 5, if that makes sense. Right. So he's kind of playing on either side of where like he probably is most comfortable, and he's doing a phenomenal job. I think the other thing, I said, looking at how his collegiate career panned out and everything else, I said something along the lines of maybe it's a reclamation project, a chance for him to rebound. And I think that's actually happening, right? Like if he has a good season this year and then follows that up and his confidence is where it needs to be, and he goes overseas in the winter and continues to play the way he's playing right now, man, sky's the limit for this kid. Like, and you're right, he's a young guy. He's got the build. He's got the skill that we've seen, and I think he's still early in his development. Like, he's just I don't want to say a late bloomer because he was really good in high school and he was good in the NCAA, but I think we're really going to see key parts of his development here. And I think this stop is going to be monumental when we look back at his career path of how the Winnipeg Sea Bears experience helped elevate him.
I got no more awards. What about you? You got any other ones or?
Just an NBA championship for the Boston Celtics.
Oh, we made it. We almost made it an hour.
Almost did. But I was thinking about it. I don't think we met.
Hour.
I think the last episode was before the Celtics won the championship. To be, to be frank, they didn't even lose enough games in an entire playoffs to get eliminated in a series. That's crazy, man. Just an all-time dominant team. Just the OB is where it should be. in
This is
Boston,
old news, man.
Massachusetts.
This was what, a week or two
It's
ago. This
I
is a
feel you.
CEBL podcast.
Here's the
Sorry,
thing:
we
it's just
missed the boat.
never
We missed the
never going to
boat.
get old. I mean, this is something we might hear on a weekly basis from here on in. Really, I'm a little disappointed because I wanted to wear my championship gear, which has not arrived yet, and I did buy a lot of it. And right after the game was done, I had a celebratory cigar, a Hoyo del Montre, which was the cigar that Red Auerbach would smoke when he knew the game was over. And I really basked in it, Taylor, because, it was a little bothersome that the Lakers had the same amount of championships as the Celtics, those frauds out in the West Coast. And, the true championship DNA came out on top. 18 banners at TD Garden. And yeah, that's the I think the championship that truly counts.
Well, enjoy the record while you can, because the Lakers just drafted Bronny James.
What
Game
do you think
changer.
about that? What do you think about that? I want to get your honest opinion.
What do I think about that? I mean, it's pretty damn cool that LeBron has been in the league for so long and he's still in the league and still playing at a high level, and his son is now at the age where he gets drafted to the NBA. I mean, because there's so many pictures of him like when he's with the Heat and Cavaliers, especially when he's like holding like a young kid, right? And now they're going to be teammates. So that side of the story is super cool. But the other side of the story, Bronny is not an NBA player. Certainly not a drafted one. Maybe an undrafted guy. You invite him to your summer league and whatever. But if you watch him at USC, his size, whatever, he's not an NBA guy. So he's taking someone else's spot, right? And so it's very obviously draft him just because of his last name. So that always rubs people the wrong way. You see a lot in coaching, right? Especially in football, like, oh, the defensive backs assistant coach is the defensive coordinator's son or whatever. But so we don't really see like this too often. So I get why it rubs people the wrong way quite a bit. But I mean, like, let's be honest, I would be surprised if Bronny even played this year. Maybe a couple games just so they could be on the same court together, but like he's gonna be in the G League, man. Like this kid is not an NBA player, but who knows? Who knows? But yeah, it's so I see both sides of the coin for sure. But back to
So,
Celtics for a second though. I want to ask you a question, and then we'll never
yeah,
speak about this championship run ever again.
I'm sure we will, but yeah.
No, we won't. But anyways, the fact that they were the heavy favorites all year long, right?
Mhm.
Like it was literally championship or bust. Like that term gets thrown around so often, but for the Celtics, like if they did not win the title this
Would you
year,
call it a must win, Taylor?
I would call it a must-win championship for these guys. I really would. I really would. So and they do it, right? And they get through every series pretty much, make it look very easy. Did that
Especially against those Pacers. Oh, anyway.
Oh, come on now. That was the most competitive four-game sweep in sports history. But
Yeah.
anyways, did that make it not quite as satisfying for you that
Are you
basically
kidding
you've
me?
been expecting this, preparing for this for months? Like when the Raptors won, like that was it was kind of out of left field, and the story was, that they went through in the playoffs is like a roller coaster of emotions, and they win. It's just like, oh my god, it's an amazing moment. But for like the Celtics, it was a very boring run, right? So
It's
like, was it
Here's what
really
I'll
that gratifying? I feel like it
It
wouldn't be,
was incredibly gratifying because if they don't win, then you're going to be losing your mind because this was the best they ever had. You're going to be questioning everything, right? It seemed like everything was building up. Like they lost the championship 2 years ago. Then last year they got beat in the conference finals. Like, so yeah, it was very gratifying. And I will say, when you're in that position, everything is under a microscope. Like people are looking for things to talk about, right? Like whether it was Joe Mazzulla doesn't know when to call a timeout, or Jason Tatum's not a true superstar, or Jalen Brown, like should he have stayed or should he have gone? Whatever. Like everything is just under a microscope, even though they were far and away better than everybody, to the point where even with Dallas, everybody was making Dallas is gonna, they're built for them. You've got Luca and Kyrie who are gamers, and Boston doesn't have that. And I'm like, there was just like blatant disrespect. And then they made quick work of them. And I figured that Dallas would win one. I think I said in the last podcast or maybe two podcasts ago, whatever. But I was like, I think it'll be a 4-1 series. I don't think they're going to sweep Dallas. I did think after 3-0 they might, but Dallas was going to win a game. But like, take that one game aside, which was like a historic loss. that was their only bad game of an entire playoffs. And up until that point, what was the win streak? Like 10 or something. And they hadn't lost a game in a month. Like, yeah, it's gratifying because look what happened to Florida, right? They have a 3-0 lead. Edmonton comes back in the NHL finals. They end up winning. But can you imagine that if your team's up 3-0 in the finals and then loses? It's only happened a handful of times in sports, let alone like a finals. I think the Leafs are the only one to do it in a finals. It's never happened in basketball. So that would have been awful. So yeah, no, it's very gratifying when the expectations there and the expectations met. Get
All
out
right,
of here
fair
with
enough.
that
Well,
garbage.
I thought it was a fair question, but okay, whatever. Fine.
Oh
Now I
man.
know. But yeah, that's the last time we'll ever speak of that title. So I'm glad you're able to get out of your system. So that's great. But anyways,
That's all right.
in closing, if people ever want to question our love for basketball or our dedication to this podcast, it's Game 7, Stanley Cup Finals, Panthers, Oilers. North America is sitting there watching this game. So many storylines. McDavid, Paul Maurice. Doesn't get any better than that. And what are Joey and I doing? We're texting about the Winnipeg Sea Bears. If we're not married to the game, I don't know who is.
It's so funny between you and Emily Potter now. Emily Potter is so dialed into this team, and she's out competing to play for Team Canada in the Olympics. It's like I talk about this team like even more than I should. Like we have a podcast, we cover the team, and we're still talking about them even when other big sporting events are happening. I love it, and yeah, and we want to hear from you, right? So I mean I probably should have checked before we started because people are asking questions on Instagram a lot. We do have an email,
We forgot
which
about the mailbag. We've
we
ditched that for a couple of
total.
weeks. It's
To
been
be
so
fair,
crazy.
it's been crazy. Like
Yeah.
just trying to get these going with all the news that's happened. I'll have to check the inbox. I haven't even really checked it. So, but yeah, you can email us targetscorepodcast@gmail.com. At Joey Slattery TV. That's on Instagram, whatever, Twitter, Facebook. At Taylor Allen 31 is Taylor's. So yeah, hit us up, man. Anything that you want to know, or if you have, an opinion on the team, you want to share your opinion, this is your chance to air it out with your peers, right? Everybody here is a CEBL fan and Sea Bears fan. I know we're not the only ones texting each other about the Sea Bears during the Stanley Cup Finals, Taylor. I'm sure there's a few of our listeners out there too when all this stuff's happening. So yeah, hit us up, man. And it's been fun. Like this year has been wild. It's been fun to cover. And I think the one thing I'll say in my closing remarks is that with everything that's happened, the adversity that this team has faced in, for CBL standards, like biblical proportions, like just the absolute craziest things from, having to cut your reigning MVP and then a week or so later having to let go of your NBA first round draft picks, 66 game starter in the league. And you've turned a 4-game losing streak into now a winning record after 11 games. This has the makings for a great story if they can continue the trajectory they're on, make a playoff run. And I, can't think about it now. They're not in that state, but just thinking ahead, if they do get to that championship game and win that, it's going to be a heck of a story. And all good stories have adversity. This team's had no shortage of it. It's going to be a very exciting second half of the season. It'll be interesting to see if they can keep this up and avoid everything that's happened in the first half and the second half. And at this point, I have no reason to believe that won't happen.
Well said. Could not agree more. Well, whether it's a happy ending, bad ending, or whatever it may be, this last half, we will be there week in, week out, delivering the good, the bad, and indifferent on Target Score Weekly.
I'm going to close it at that. That was amazing.
No, thanks. Appreciate it.
That was a really, really good closing.
That just came off the tip of my tongue, and away you go.
Thank you for listening to the Target Score Weekly podcast. To stay up to date with Winnipeg Sea Bears and CEBL news, as well as future episode releases, follow Joey and Taylor on Twitter and Instagram at TaylorAllen31 and at Joey Slattery TV. And wherever you're getting the podcast, be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode.